Hello everyone and welcome back to the Flutter tutorial. In this video we will continue with Dart and we will have a quick look at lists and classes. So let's get started. First, what are lists? Lists are actually arrays in other programming language. We can save multiple data inside them. So to create a list, I just say list, then the name of the list, let's call it animals, equal, square bracket, then semicolon. Now this is an empty list. We can initialize it in multiple ways. For example, we can initialize it while we are creating it. So we can say, let's say cat, then dog, and I will say monkey also. Okay, to print these, like any other variable, I can say print, then the name of the variable with semicolon. If I run it, hopefully we will see the list. Here we go. Okay. Now list has many methods. For example, we can add to it, we can remove from it, we can do a lot with list. Let's add another animal. We call the list animals, then dot, and we write add. Then here we can add whatever value we want to. Let's say I want to add bird with semicolon. If I run it, we shall see bird at the last of the list. Alright, here we go. Now we can also remove from the list. If I say animals.remove, let's say I want to remove the dog with a semicolon. If I run it, we shall not find the dog here. Okay, so right now I can add literally any value I want to. For example, if I want to add a number, I can say animals.add 1, for example, and if I print it, it will print 1 at the end of the list. Why is that? Because this is a dynamic list right now. So we can also add booleans. For example, if I say animals.add false, then run it, it will definitely print false at the end of the list. So this is a dynamic list to me, and this list is not recommended. It's not recommended to have data like that in a single list. So what we can do, actually, we can come here and after list we can write the type of the list. If I write string now, these two will throw an error. Why? Because this list is a string list and these aren't strings. So if I write for instead of string bool, everything will throw an error, even this, except that this is a boolean. So let's return it to a string. And even if I try to add them here, for example 1 and true, they will also throw error here. We can't do that. So as I said previously, list has many methods that we can use. For example, if I write animals dot, we will have many. We can read them all, but we can type something and it will autocomplete the rest. For example, if I write remove, we will have different methods than the first one that we used. We have, for example, remove at, and this is remove at by index. We pass a number here, so if I write 0, it will remove the first index, which is cat. If I run it now, we shall see monkey and bird, and that's it. And we have different than that. You can explore them yourself. So now let's get rid of everything and let's start with the classes. Alright guys, now let's create a class. To create a class, we type class, then the name of the class. Let's create a class called square with the brackets, and this is our class. Here we can create methods, we can have variables, we can do all that. So I will create a variable called int side. Then it might show me an error, and yes it did. It showed me an error. This error is saying that this field is non-nullable and we're not initializing it. So we can put a question mark here and this error is solved. Or we can leave it. We want this field to be non-nullable. Alright. To solve this error, we can also try to give it a value, which will work also, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to instantiate this variable here. I want to give it value from somewhere else. What we need to do is we need to create a constructor. What a constructor is? A constructor is the method that gets called when we first initialize a class. And it has to have the same name as class. So what I will do, I will say square, then inside here. In other programming languages, we used to say int side, then inside here we say this dot side is equal to side. What this actually means, this refers to this class. So this side is equal to the side sent in this function. But in Dart, there is a much easier way to do so. What we can actually do, we remove all that and put semicolon here. Then instead of saying inside, I can say this dot side. And this will work fine. And if we want to, we can make it named parameter. To make it named parameter, we surround it with curly brackets. And we have to say it's required. Otherwise, we can put the question mark here and it's not required and it's nullable variable, but it's not. So let's create a function in this class. Let's say a function that returns integer, and this function will call it calculate area. It wouldn't take anything, we already have the side, so we can calculate the area ourselves. The area of a square is side times side. What we need to do is just say return, and since this is one statement body function, we can make it a row function by that, like that. So this is a function called calculate area, and it returns the area. Inside the main function, I need to instantiate this class. To instantiate it like any other object or variable, we used to say, for example, string a is equal to, no, here we say square, for example, is equal to square. And inside here, this bracket, this will call this constructor. So what we need to do, we need to provide the side. I will call size is 5. Now this will work. What I can do is int area is equal to square dot calculate area. And here I can calculate the area and get the area by that. Now I can say print area. If I run it, it should be 25. What I will do now is creating a new function. Let's say void draw. It wouldn't return anything and it's an arrow function. I will just say print drawing a square. Okay, now I can say square dot draw and it should print it. Okay, what I want to do now is create another class. This class will be called rectangle, and it will do pretty much the same as a square. I will say int width, length, then I will say rectangle, the required, this dot width, required, this dot length, and I will copy these. I just have to remove an I. Now the area of the rectangle is width times length, and I will just say drawing a rectangle. If I come up here and say rectangle is equal to rectangle and pass the width to 3, length to 5 with semicolon, I can say rectangle dot draw and rectangle dot calculate area. It's the same functionality actually. But what I want to do is to create a parent class for these classes. Now this is a rectangle and this is a square, and they both have calculate area, and they both have a draw function. What we can do is we can create a parent class for these classes. The parent class for these classes is obviously a shape. What we can say is class shape, and here, instead of each function to have its own function, what we can do, we can have these functions inside this class. So I will say int calculate area, and it wouldn't have any body. Then void draw, this also wouldn't have any body. And let's say each shape has an ID. Let's say int ID, and this ID is not required, so I can say like that. In the shape constructor, I will say this dot ID. All right. Now, if we can see, both these functions are having errors. Why is that? Because they don't have a body. If I do that, they wouldn't now complain. It's complaining because it needs a return, for example, and this will solve the error. But I don't want to do that. Actually, I need the functionality of these functions to be inside the children classes. So what I need to do is to make this class abstract class. I will type abstract here, and this will solve this problem. Now, instead of writing these like that, I will say here extends shape. What we need to do is we need to write an annotation of override, and this is an overridden, and this is an overridden function. Same to here, I will say override, and this will work. Now, if I want to pass an ID for this constructor, what I can do is come here and put right super, then ID is 1, for example. I can do that, and this will initialize this ID. If I make this required and I remove this, this will throw an error. To solve this error, we just say super ID and give it an ID, and we don't actually need to pass a specific ID. We need to have the user to give us an ID, and this time, instead of saying required this.id, what I can do required int ID, and we can take it from here and give it inside here. So now this square class is a children for this shape class. Let me give you a little bit of space down there, and we will do the same for rectangle extends shape. Now we have to pass the ID, required int ID, then super ID, and here I just have to say override. Same to here, override. Now if I run it, nothing will be sorry, I have to pass the ID. ID is now here 1, and ID here is 2. If I run it, nothing actually will change. It will all work like before. So you may wonder, why did we do all that and we have the same result? Well, this is inheritance, and inheritance has many benefits. For example, if we take a look at the square class, square has only a field called integer side, then we have calculate area, and we have draw, and these two functions actually came from shape. They are not they don't belong to square immediately, they belong to shape. So if I come here and say square dot, I will have the ID here. Where did the ID come from? The ID came from the shape. We don't have any ID here. We have the ID in the shape. So if we have functions or more functions here, let's create void draw2, for example, and I will say print drawing from parent. Now square or rectangle, all of them will have access to this method. If I run it, we shall see drawing from parent. Okay, one last thing guys, I just want to apply what we learned in lists with classes. I will create a list. This time it's not a string, this time it's actually not also square, not rectangle, it's shape, the parent. So I will say shape, and I will call it shapes is equal to empty list. Now here we created square, we created rectangle. Let me erase all this. And what I will do here is I will say shapes dot add square, then shapes dot add rectangle. Alright. Now if I want to access this objects inside a list, I can create a for loop. For example, for int I is equal to 0, then I is less than shapes dot length plus plus, and I can say shapes for I, then I say dot. We will have only the main objects. What do I mean with the main object? We only have what we have inside this shape class, not anything else. For example, let me create a function inside the square called void draw square, for example, and here print drawing from square. If I put dot here, I wouldn't see it, but I will still see what we have inside here. So what if I want to access this object, but also I want to access this method if it was a square? First, let me erase this for loop, because we can write a better for, which is for each. I can say, and here we give the type, then I will say shape in shapes, and here I have the shape. The shape is actually like before when I said shapes and I, so this is better. Shape.draw, for example, it will work fine. Shape.id, it will work fine, but what doesn't work is shape dot, for example, side. No suggestion. What we can do in Dart, we can use a keyword called is. What is keyword do? I can say if shape is what is square. Alright, then inside the if I can say shape. Now if I put dot, I shall see the side, I shall see the draw square, I can see everything inside this class. Why? Because Dart is smart enough to convert this shape into square. So if I say dot, now I have the side, I have draw square, let's say draw square. Now here I will say else if shape is rectangle, and I want to access, for example, print, I will say width equal to shape dot width, and length is equal to shape dot length. Alright, now if I run it, let's see what will happen. What we can see is drawing a square. Drawing a square is inside the square class, the overridden function draw, drawing a square. Now we will come inside the if shape is a square, which is, it is a square, shape.draw square. Inside the draw square here we have drawing from square, which we have here. Then it ended up our first iteration, then it got the next shape.draw, which is the rectangle now. So it's saying drawing a rectangle. Then we have print width is equal to 3 and length is equal to 5. So here you go, my friends. If you like the video, please subscribe, comment and like the video, and see you in the next tutorial.